Today we're going to be learning about different brush strokes. I can make different types of lines on my paper depending on how hard I push with my paintbrush. I know that the harder I push, the bigger my line will appear. And the lighter I push, or if I barely even touch my paper at all, the smaller my line will appear. So this is me just lightly touching my paper with my paintbrush and making a tiny line. Then I push a little bit harder to make a medium line, and I push all the way down to make a bigger line. Notice that the hairs do not spread out and go all over the place, and I didn't give my brush a bad hair day. I pulled my brush from one side to the other, keeping the hairs safe and looking good. Remember when we were collaging and we talked about overlapping, which is when one paper goes over top of another? Well, we can overlap with paint too. It's when you paint on top of another color after it's dry. It's really interesting to see how the color changes when another color is on top of it. The next thing I want to show you is transitioning one color to another, or blending. First, make sure your paint is really wet when putting it on your paper. Then paint two colors next to each other. After you have those two areas painted, mix them together in the middle while the paint is still wet. You're going to want to work pretty fast before this paint dries. The next thing I'm playing with is making dots on my paper by just using the tiny point of my paintbrush. This is called dabbing, or even sometimes pointillism. I can also try making little dashes or lines on my paper for a different look. Next, I want to show you the difference between having a dry brush and a wet brush. If your brush is more dry than wet, the line will look broken up into smaller pieces and kind of streaky. If your paintbrush is nice and wet, it will be smooth. Sometimes you can use the dry brush look to give a certain texture to your artwork, but other times you just want your painting to be smooth. And last, I want to show you something called wet on wet. First, paint your paper with clean water and then paint on the wet paper. That's wet paint on wet paper. It makes all the paint look a little cloudy and some of the colors will mix together. It makes a really cool effect. Give it a try. Have fun playing around with the different painting techniques that I showed you. Paintings can look different depending on the way that you paint them.